There is a specific kind of person who can spend hours thinking about someone, wondering how they are doing, remembering conversations from months ago, even missing people deeply, and yet never send the first message. You might know someone like this, or perhaps you are that person. The strange thing is that from the outside, their behavior can look cold, detached, uninterested, as if they simply do not care enough to reach out. But if you look closer, something much more complicated is happening beneath the surface. Because the people who never text first are often not the people who care the least. Sometimes they are the people who care the most. And that contradiction is where the story begins. Most people assume texting is a simple action. You think of someone, you open your phone, you send a message. But human behavior is rarely that simple. Every action carries meaning, and every hesitation carries a story. When someone consistently avoids texting first, it is easy to interpret it as confidence, pride, laziness, or lack of interest. Sometimes it is, but often it is something deeper. Because this isn't really about texting. It never was. The phone is only the stage. The real drama is happening somewhere else entirely. It is happening inside the person's relationship with rejection, vulnerability, and self-worth. Many people who never text first live with an invisible rule, a rule they may not even realize exists. The rule says, if someone wants me in their life, they will reach out. At first, this sounds reasonable, even healthy. But hidden inside that belief is a quiet test, a test that is constantly running in the background. They wait, and they watch, and they measure. Who remembers them? Who reaches out? Who makes the effort? Because for them, initiation is not just communication. It is evidence. Evidence that they matter. Evidence that they are valued. Evidence that the connection is real. The problem is that other people are often running the exact same test. Two people can care about each other deeply, while both waiting for the other to make the first move. And silence slowly grows between them. Not because affection disappeared, but because vulnerability did. This is one of the uncomfortable truths about human relationships. We often mistake absence of action for absence of feeling, when in reality, many relationships end not because people stopped caring, but because neither person was willing to risk being the one who cared first. Psychologists sometimes describe a concept called rejection sensitivity. It refers to the tendency to anxiously expect rejection, even when there is little evidence that rejection is actually happening. People with high rejection sensitivity often become extremely skilled at detecting signs of disinterest. A delayed reply, a shorter message, a change in tone, a forgotten invitation. Most people barely notice these things. But for someone who is highly sensitive to rejection, these moments can feel enormous. Their mind becomes a pattern recognition machine, constantly scanning for proof, constantly searching for clues, constantly asking one question. Do I matter to this person as much as they matter to me? And when they cannot find a clear answer, they often choose silence. Not because they do not want connection, but because silence feels safer than uncertainty. This is where childhood often enters the story. Many people learn very early in life that attention must be earned. Maybe affection was inconsistent. Maybe approval depended on achievement. Maybe emotional needs were ignored. Or maybe they simply grew up in environments where vulnerability felt dangerous. Children adapt. They always do. And the strategies that help them survive childhood often follow them into adulthood. The child who learned not to ask for attention
becomes the adult who never sends the first message. The child who learned not to burden others becomes the adult who never reaches out. The child who feared rejection becomes the adult who waits to be chosen.
Tired of carrying conversations. Tired of being the only person making the effort. And eventually, they stop. Not because they have become bitter, but because they have become selective. They begin to value reciprocity. They decide that relationships should reveal themselves naturally. If someone wants to stay, they will stay. If someone wants to leave, they will leave. This mindset often emerges after disappointment, after enough one-sided friendships, after enough unanswered messages, after enough emotional investments that produced very little return. And so they withdraw. Not dramatically, not angrily, quietly, almost invisibly. What makes this fascinating is that the exact same behavior can emerge from completely different psychological worlds. One person never texts first because they fear rejection. Another never texts first because they respect themselves. One is avoiding pain. The other is protecting energy. From the outside, they look identical, but internally, they are living entirely different stories. This reveals something important about human behavior. Actions alone rarely tell the whole truth. The meaning of a behavior depends on the psychology behind it, and psychology is often invisible. This is why we misunderstand each other so easily. We judge behavior, but we rarely see the beliefs, memories, fears, and experiences creating that behavior. The person who never texts first may appear distant. Meanwhile, they may spend more time thinking about their relationships than anyone else. The irony is almost painful. Some of the people who crave connection the most become experts at withholding it. Not intentionally, but because connection requires risk, and risk requires vulnerability. The thing many people fear is not rejection itself. It is what rejection seems to say about them. Because when a message goes unanswered, it can activate old questions. Questions that have nothing to do with texting. Questions like, am I important? Am I wanted? Am I enough?
This is why a simple message can feel emotionally expensive. It is not the message. It is the meaning attached to the message. And meaning has power. Far more power than most people realize. The longer someone avoids initiating, the easier it becomes to justify the habit. Months become years, friendships fade, opportunities disappear. Not because they were unwanted, but because they were never pursued. This creates a strange paradox. The desire for certainty often destroys the very connections that could have provided certainty. Because relationships cannot survive entirely on observation. At some point, they require participation. At some point, someone has to risk being the first person to reach out. Someone has to risk being misunderstood. Someone has to risk caring openly. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson hidden inside this behavior. Human connection was never designed to be perfectly safe. Every meaningful relationship contains uncertainty. Every friendship contains vulnerability. Every act of reaching out contains the possibility of disappointment. But it also contains the possibility of something else. A conversation. A reconnection. A memory. A friendship that survives. A relationship that grows. A life that becomes richer because someone was willing to take the first step. And maybe that is why this topic resonates with so many people. Because almost everyone knows what it feels like to wait, to wonder, to hope someone else will make the move, to convince themselves that silence is strength. When sometimes, silence is simply fear dressed as wisdom. So the next time you find yourself staring at your phone, waiting for someone else to reach out first, it may be worth asking a deeper question. Are you protecting your peace? Or are you protecting yourself from the possibility of discovering how much courage real connection actually requires?